Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1019B, and today's date is July 11th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Obama and the UN are now forming a global police force in the US. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we understand that Obama, the central bankers, they need control of currency, which they have. They need control of the internet, which they're trying to get. They need control of the people, and they've been trying to take control by bringing in federal dollars into the local police forces, giving them military armaments, hoping that they would have the ability to completely control them. But they see that that is not enough. They need more control. So we see Attorney General Loretta Lynch. She announced at the United Nations that her office would be working in several American cities to form what she called the Strong Cities Network, a law enforcement initiative that would encompass the globe. This amounts to nothing less than overriding the American laws, up to including the United States Constitution in favor of United Nations laws that would be implemented in the United States without consulting Congress at all. So, if the local and municipal effort to counter violent extremism, or any type of extremism whatsoever, if it's inadequate and hasn't developed systematic efforts which are in place to share experiences, pool resources, and build a community of cities to inspire local action on a global scale, the feds and the UN, they'll have to step in. Thus, the groundwork is being laid for a federal and international interference down to the local level. This is the Strong Cities Network. It will serve as a vital tool to strengthen capacity building and improve collaboration. So, what are they looking to do here? If local municipal police forces cannot handle what is going on, they'll have a global force to take care of it. So if there's extremism, violence, and it looks like it's getting out of control, this is a way for the federal government to control the entire country one way or another. And this will spread to other countries. Because as we know, the federal government is looking to control everything. This is their main objective. They need control of education. They need control of law enforcement. They need control of the media. They need control of currency. They need control of the internet. And it looks like they're moving in this direction, because it's much easier to push federal forces out into the country to take control of every situation. Now, can they be everywhere? Most likely not. But if they work in concert with the UN, guess what? They can bring in a lot of personnel that are not part of the US, that are foreigners to this country, that don't care about the people. And they will be able to bring in military equipment. This is where they're moving. This is what they're trying to do. Remember, they do it very slowly, very methodically. And they do a little bit more each time. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. And we have to remember, we're seeing riots all over the United States now, or I should say protests, which are turning into riots. And it looks like they're trying to build some type of race war. Now, out in Germany, we see that there's civil unrest there. 3,500 people were rioting against the police. And we see about 120 police were injured. And it was a street battle. There were fireworks. They were throwing bottles. They destroyed cars. Now, of course, this might have been ginned up to get things going out in other countries. We've seen this before. And this is something that we need to watch. Now, the U.S. has been putting out warnings asking families to evacuate in certain areas. We see in Bangladesh, the State Department says it's authorizing the voluntary departure of family members of the U.S. Embassy in Bangladesh. We see in South Sudan, the United States decided to evacuate part of employees from its embassy in South Sudan because of the ongoing violence and trouble being pushed in that region. So we're seeing a lot of warnings come out of the State Department all across this entire area throughout Europe, in Turkey, in Lebanon, and it is spreading because to me it seems like they're getting prepared for something huge in this entire area. And we know that as this economy continually deteriorates, as we've been tracking, they're pushing harder and harder. And we can see that North Korea, it's one of those countries where they do believe they'll be able to force them into doing something. We know that the U.S. is continually out there saying, okay, they launched a ballistic missile. They haven't shown any proof. The intelligence is coming from South Korea. They exploded a bomb underground. That's why we had the earthquake, but there was no radiation. And we know they're bringing in military assets and putting a lot of pressure on North Korea. So we can see right now they've tried with China. They're continually still provoking China, trying to bring them into the fold. Russia, they're using Russian aggression. They're using this to bring military assets and troops all throughout Eastern Europe, the Middle East. And with North Korea, they're placing sanctions and continually putting a lot of pressure on North Korea. Now, North Korea might be the country that actually breaks. Now, if they don't break and do something like the central bankers, U.S. government want them to do, they'll do it for them. And of course, this is a false flag. Now, North Korea, they have closed their communications channel with the United States. This is exactly what the United States was looking for because of the sanctions they placed on the leader and other people in North Korea. North Korea decided, you know what? We're closing all communication channels. And we see right now that North Korea, well, they're going to be going to wartime approach diplomacy with the U.S. in handling American citizens in North Korea. So what are we seeing right now? We're seeing the U.S. pushing North Korea, provoking them, doing whatever they can, putting a lot of pressure on them to making them do these things. And we can see right now that it's working. This is exactly what they want this country to do. This is exactly what they want the leaders to do in this country. And they're going to push harder now to get them to do something. Most likely fly some planes, maybe sail some ships very close to theirs, hoping that they'll open fire by just maybe shoot some warning shots or do anything. And if they can't get them to go to that next level, the U.S. government central bankers, they will do it for them and say they did it to get us into war. Remember, they're trying every way, any way they possibly can to get this war started. They're pushing China in the South China Sea. They're pushing Russia. Of course, they're not taking the bait, but North Korea, it looks like they might be taking the bait, and we're going to have to watch that situation very carefully. Now, out in Ukraine, it looks like things are starting to heat up. We see Ukraine forces, they fired 104 shells on Donetsk in the last 24 hours. We also see Russia. They are warning that Kiev may launch a new offensive against the Donbass region this summer. And they're seeing signs of this. And Moscow is urging Paris and Berlin to put pressure on the Ukrainian authorities to prevent a potential renewal of violence right now. Now, we know the ceasefire is in place. We know there's a lot of violations with this ceasefire. We hear John Kerry saying that the ceasefire is really not working. We understand there's a lot of people in the Kiev government who are saying that we don't even want to complete the Minsk II ceasefire. And we see a lot of military assets being moved up to the contact line. And each time and each day that passes, we see more and more of this. Now, Turkey and Italy, they're going to be holding an observation flight over Russia under the Open Skies deal. And you have to remember the Open Skies deal was signed back in 1992. And this was to allow Russia and other countries to fly over each country to take a look to make sure that there's no forces being built up. And this includes 34 states, including Russia and most NATO members. So there's a lot of countries that are involved in this. And during the Ukraine crisis, where we had that coup d'etat, Russia let Ukraine, the United States, UK fly over their borders to show that we have no troop buildup whatsoever. But of course, that wasn't reported in the corporate media. Now, NATO, they are pledging 4 more years of war in Afghanistan. And they're backing the U.S. The U.S. is not leaving. NATO is out there. They're sending a clear message that Afghanistan doesn't stand alone. And we can see that NATO is going to be set up in this region with the U.S. because this is a strategic location. They were never leaving this area. We also see NATO and the European Union. It looks like they're going to be becoming one and the same. Now, did they come out and announce this, that this is what's happening? But no, but if we listen to Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, he said that the summit is important because it reflects that we are bringing the NATO-EU cooperation to a new level. And it looks like they will be bringing it to the next new level where they need to combine forces with the EU army that will work with the NATO forces, and this will just be one gigantic force. We see in Libya, there are leaked tapes. There are air traffic recordings indicating that General Hafta receives Western support. Because in these air traffic control recordings, we hear British, French, Italian, and U.S. forces. They've been coordinating airstrikes in support of General Hafta. And it indicates they are helping him not fight against the Islamic State, fight against the people in the country, fight against the elected government. And they're using him in this way, and they're assisting him in this way. We see in Iraq, there are leaked records showing that some Iraqi politicians were bankrolling the Islamic State. Now remember, the government in Iraq is the puppet government of the United States government central bankers, and most likely the money was flowing through them. We see that this is a critical moment in Syria. The UN envoy for Syria said we are at a crucial moment because we need to broker some type of agreement to end this war. Between now, he said, and September, we have a window to find a formula which combines the fight against the Islamic State and al-Nusra and the political transition. But we need Russia and the U.S. to come together. Now, has Russia and the U.S. come together completely? No, not yet. Because there's still differences. The U.S., they're backing the moderate rebels, which are intertwined with al-Nusra, al-Qaeda. Russia's been asking them to separate them. But we'll have to watch this situation very carefully. We see that the U.S. is now sending more troops into Iraq. Now remember, the Islamic State, they've reduced their land that they occupied from 40% down to 10%, and the U.S. is sending more and more troops into this area. So they're sending about 560 troops. Most likely it'll be a lot more. And you have to remember, the agreement with the Iraqi government says there only can be about 4,600 or so permanent troops. The problem with this is that they're up to the maximum level. So the rest of the troops coming in, they are called temporary troops with no expiration date. So this is how the U.S. gets around this, where they say, no, we only have 4,600 permanent, The rest are temporary. And those numbers are like 3, 4, 5,000 temporary troops in the country. And they continually send more and more a little bit at a time, and this is mission creep. Because why are they bringing in more and more troops into this region? Well, one, the people of Iraq, they want the puppet government out of there. There's people that are rising up in Iraq. The U.S. is trying to keep control. They're losing control. A lot of these troops are being siphoned into Syria. And it still looks like they are planning something to go live this summer. And we're still looking at this August date. And we realize this is not the only plan they have. As we can see with the shooting in Dallas and the protests around the country and riots that are breaking out, we hear more and more shootings that are going on. It looks like they're trying to create some type of race war. And we know there's a lot of agendas associated with this. Gun control, changing the narrative in the news away from Hillary Clinton and the email scandal, maybe to postpone elections because they're worried that they're not going to get the person they want in government. But during all of this, what we're seeing is that the FBI gun background checks, they broke all records this June. And it looks like they're going to smash the records that was set back in 2015. So every time this happens, more Americans go out and they purchase more weapons. And we can see that people are starting to realize that they need to protect themselves. Now, something very interesting with the Dallas shooter. Back in 2014, we see Mika Johnson actually was in the audience when Obama was giving a speech at an Air Force base. And Johnson was involved directly with preparations to welcome the president. So he was in the audience right behind him. He was involved in preparing for the president, most likely met the president, and 2 weeks later, he was discharged for sexual harassment. And this is the person that went on this rampage in Dallas. Now, did they promise him something? Was he on medication? Because there were reports out there that he was looking to be a police officer. And when we look at what happened in Orlando, this other person who was set up as a patsy, he also wanted to be a police officer. And these two people went ahead and started to shoot other people. Mika Johnson allegedly shot police officers. Or did they promise him something? Did they tell him this was a drill? This was a way to get in? We don't know for sure. But we know one thing for sure, is that all of these people, they end up dead. They can't testify. They can't tell their story. They can't do anything. Now, on SGT Report, Sean put up a really good video showing there was gunfire coming from a different area, and it looks like it shot one of the shots shot down the police officer. And then there was another scene of whoever it was running around shooting people, also shot down the officer. So we're hearing a lot of conflicting stories. And then we hear the president and Jay Johnson out there saying that he acted completely alone. But you can see shots being shot from above. You see the sparks from the bullet. And right now, the stories, they contradict themselves. And as we see more and more of this evidence come to light, we're starting to realize that they are using this to create the idea that the country is headed towards some type of race riot, race war. And we're going to have to watch this situation very, very closely because we're hearing about shootings all over the place. There was a shooting in Barron County Courthouse. Looks like 3 people were dead. The shooter died. This was in Michigan. And we're seeing that this is popping up all over the place. Now, the only way they can get this going is to have riots break out in multiple cities at once, because one city or 2 cities, the president really can't declare martial law. He needs this to happen throughout the East Coast, the North Midwest, the South Midwest, and the West. And it has to happen in many, many cities. And it has to spread quickly. And it has to seem like it's a state of emergency for him to declare martial law and to suspend the Constitution. And this is something that we need to watch, because it looks like this is what they're trying to build up to. It looks like they're trying to force. And what we have to realize as a people, we shouldn't be fighting ourselves. We shouldn't be fighting black, white, yellow, orange, green, purple, whatever religion you are. We, the people, we need to stand together as one. And our eyes should be set on the government. Our eyes should be set on the central bankers. We should all come together and say, no, you're not going to do this. We stand as one. We, the people, stand as one. And it's time for this government to go. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.